This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Japan launches the world's first deep-sea trial to secure its own rare earth supply. A month-long mission lifting seabed sludge from 6 kilometers below the surface. Now, amid the global rare earth scramble, G7 officials head to Washington for emergency talks, as analysts warn China's grip on the industry may last another decade. Beijing warns Washington against interference after President Trump's threat of U.S. intervention over protests in Iran, while Tehran says it does not seek war, but is open to talks based on mutual respect. South Korea has opened a probe after Pyongyang said recovered drone footage from cross-border incursions identified sensitive sites. Also on the bulletin, a Hong Kong court hears mitigation arguments for pro-democracy tycoon Jimmy Lai following his landmark conviction. Plus, Malaysia's goal to become a key player in critical minerals and its impact on relations with China and the US. Japan has embarked on a month-long mission to explore seabed mud that's rich in rare earths, as Tokyo looks to reduce its reliance on China for critical minerals. Now, the research ship, Chikyu, departed for waters near Minamitori Island, southeast of Tokyo. Now, the expedition marks the world's first attempt to continuously extract rare earth sludge from 6 kilometers below the ocean surface. Now, it's also Japan's inaugural effort to source rare earths domestically.
その間、海に日本がですね、いわゆる重機土類など重要なレアアースも南鳥島で産出できるんであれば、それは日本はそれを世界に他の国にも輸出していくこともできるので、非常に重要な戦略的にも重要な位置づけにもなっていくと、いうことで、そこはビジネスチャンスでもあり、国全体にとってもプラス、いろんな交渉力にもなっていく可能性もあるというふうに思います。
Japan's deep-sea rare earth hunt comes amid a diplomatic spat with China over Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan. China last week banned exports of dual-use items for civilian and military use to Japan's military, including some critical minerals. Now, many economies are also increasingly looking to reduce their dependency on Chinese rare earths as the global trade environment grows more uncertain. Now, officials from the G7 are set to convene in Washington for an emergency meeting focused on securing rare earths. Now, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will urge the grouping to step up efforts to reduce its dependence on China for those critical minerals, according to a Reuters report. Now, the meeting will likely include finance ministers from Australia and India, which are among the top producers of rare earths, as well as South Korea, the EU, and Mexico. The G7 group of advanced economies alone account for 60% of global demand for critical minerals. Now, it's unclear if Japan will be there. The meeting comes days after reports that China had begun restricting rare earth exports to the nation. The meeting follows a G7 leaders summit in June, where leaders agreed on an action plan to secure their supply chains. Well, you see, China dominates the critical mineral supply chain, and according to analysis by the International Energy Agency, it will continue to do so for the next 10 years without further efforts to loosen its control. And CNA's Julie Yu walks us through the painstaking process of turning rare earth deposits into building blocks of modern technology, while Yasmin Yonkers explains the environmental impact.
Rare earths are not exactly rare, despite what the name suggests. They're so common, you may even have a smidge buried in your own backyard. Deposits are found around the world, but China, Brazil, and India hold the largest reserves. China dominates production, supplying nearly 70% of global output last year, while the US, Myanmar, and Australia trail far behind. So why is it so hard to loosen China's grip on rare earths? It's mostly because processing these 17 elements is several times harder than pronouncing their names. It all begins with mining the ore from an open pit or an underground mine. The ore is moved to a nearby processing plant, pounded, and turned into clay slurry. That slurry is mixed with water and infused with gas. Rare earth minerals bind with bubbles and float to the surface, leaving behind waste material. What's left is a mixed concentrate that's about 60 to 70% rare earth. Now here comes the tricky part, separating individual elements from each other. The concentrate is mixed with solvents such as ammonia, hydrochloric acids, and sulfates, some of which can be toxic. The certain ores need an extra step to remove radioactive elements. Now, once oxides or carbonates are separated, they're refined into rare earth metals. Now, some of the most widely used magnets contain neodymium and praseodymium. They're combined with iron and boron and cooked to make powdered alloy. Now, that alloy is further broken down into even smaller pieces and then again baked in a process called sintering before it's formed into magnets. Those magnets power electrified motion in a vast range of products. There are electric motors that drive the wheels of EVs, and a single smartphone can use up to 16 of these elements. That's all but one, making it vibrate and powering the speakers and microphone. America's most advanced fighter jet, the F-35, uses more than 400 kilos of these materials in its weapons, targeting systems, and lasers. Rare earths are magic ingredients that help put modern technology quite literally in the palm of our hands. But there is a price to pay.
Mining and processing these elements is a dirty business. Strong acids are needed to separate rare earths, and that could lead to severe environmental pollution and radioactive byproducts. Researchers estimate that refining 1 ton of the materials produces up to 2,000 tons of toxic waste. The Bayan Obo mining town in China's Inner Mongolia is home to the world's largest rare earth production facility. Local officials warned as early as 2009 that mines were discharging radioactive chemicals into the environment. This vast area, known as a tailings dam, is about 10 square kilometers in size. It holds millions of tons of toxic sludge dumped by refiners. And that radioactive material seeps into soil and water, or dust from the site drifts into nearby villages, damaging ecosystems and threatening human health. Separate studies found intellectual development disorders in children affected by pollution. Farmers in China have complained about losing their livelihoods. Some say they have lost their teeth and hair, as tests show high levels of cancerous radioactive material in their soil and water.
China has warned the U.S. against interfering in the internal affairs of other countries after Donald Trump's threat on action in Iran over deadly protests. Now, the remarks come as Iran's foreign minister says that Tehran is not seeking war, but is fully prepared for it. Abbas Araghchi added that Iran is ready for negotiations based on, quote, mutual respect. Washington earlier announced that Tehran has requested for talks after President Donald Trump repeatedly threatened to intervene militarily if Iran killed protesters. Now, Iran's top diplomat also claiming that security forces have, quote, full control of the country. Demonstrations have been taking place for about 3 weeks now, with rights groups reporting at least 500 people killed. On the ground, Iran's national police chief says significant arrests have been made as authorities ramp up efforts to confront the protesters. Rights groups say more than 2,600 protesters have been detained. Beijing also added its voice to growing calls for parties to work towards peace and stability in the Middle East. The Chinese Foreign Ministry stressed that sovereignty and security of all countries should be fully protected under international law. Well, CNA's correspondent Deborah Wong joins us live now from Shenzhen. Deborah, essentially, in a nutshell, what is at stake for China in Iran?
So China views Iran as a valuable partner in the Middle East. It's also a key to its Middle Eastern region, especially as it sees the global South as an important part of its global strategy. So Iran is a member of BRICS as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, both forums that China is also a part of, and they also view these forums as a counterweight to the US-led world order. So bilaterally, China buys 90% of Iranian oil. So any political instability in the country could kind of affect China's own trade investments, economic interests in the country, and also opens it up to more uncertainties like what we are seeing in the situation playing out in Venezuela right now, especially with the US in the picture. And, Trump right now has also threatened to take action against the regime. And even though he says that he will not be putting any boots on the ground, in response, Iran has told Trump to stay in his lane and also warn of retaliation if the US does take action. Chinese Foreign Ministry just said during a press conference this afternoon that it opposes such external interference or any threat of force in terms of international relations. They've also called on all parties to exercise restraint and promote peace in the region. Now, peace is important here. This is very, very important here because of the situation that we saw play out in June last year. A lot of industry experts are warning that escalation or any military confrontation could trigger Iran into shutting the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that's significant because the Strait of Hormuz is pretty much the main artery as to which 20 to 25% of global shipments of oil and gas pass through. So if that strait is shut, it essentially means a chokehold on supply, and it could also result in escalation of prices. Now, Iran is also an influential power in the Middle East, and the Middle East is a strategic pillar of interest for China because China has a lot of trade investments in that region. So it really is in China's interest to see economic stability, political stability there. Even so, in terms of action, China is quite restrained in its support. It traditionally wants to avoid military involvement or any direct confrontation that could open it up to international sanctions or even condemnation from the global community. It often opts for a more indirect, cautious diplomatic approach instead. Look no further than the bilateral relationship we are seeing between China and Iran. They have signed in 2021 a 25-year cooperation pact. But a lot of observers have pointed out that, it's really just political. They haven't seen much progress on that front because a lot of Chinese companies have avoided putting a lot of investments in there given the political instability in the country. So China has to navigate all these limitations. We have seen in recent years that China has hedged its bets. In fact, where oil is concerned, it's also been diversifying its supply with Russia, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia.
Hey, thanks so much for that report. CNA's Deborah Wong reporting to us live from Shenzhen. Another news. South Korean police and military officials have launched a joint investigation into North Korea's claims of drone incursions across the inter-Korean border. Now, Pyongyang's military says South Korea violated its sovereignty by sending drones into the north in September and again on 4th of January, an accusation Seoul has denied. Well, over the weekend, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, demanded a detailed explanation from the Republic of Korea, South Korea's official name. Now, she claimed data recovered from the drones included footage of sensitive sites, including the Kaesong Industrial Complex and North Korean border posts. She warned that if Seoul blames civilian groups, the North's own civilian organizations could respond with drone flights. Well, Seoul has rejected those allegations, and the Defense Ministry says the South Korean military did not send the drones and does not operate the models North Korea claims to have recovered, raising the possibility that private entities may have been involved. Well, Seoul says it has no intention of provoking Pyongyang and will continue efforts to ease tensions, adding that any follow-up steps will be considered after the investigation is completed. Now, Hong Kong's High Court is hearing mitigation arguments for convicted media tycoon Jimmy Lai in the city's landmark national security case. Lai was found guilty last month of 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and 1 count of conspiracy to publish seditious material. Now, the verdict was criticized by Western nations as political persecution. Lai, who turned 78 last month, could be jailed for life. He denies all charges. The mitigation hearing is expected to span several days as Lai's lawyers argue for a lighter sentence. The court will decide on the punishment at a later date. Lai has been behind bars for more than 5 years now. Now, US President Trump said that he had asked Chinese President Xi Jinping to release Lai. Well, the UN Human Rights Council also called for Lai's release on humanitarian grounds. Hong Kong authorities, meanwhile, say Lai was given a fair trial and that Beijing's national security law has brought stability to the territory. A time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, the Kospi continuing its rally to hit a fresh high. We'll take a look at which sectors are driving the index to a new record. Well, however, weaknesses in the won and Japanese yen against the US dollar causing a headache for soccer teams in South Korea and Japan. Hello again. Good to have you back with us on East Asia Tonight. It is now time for business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, looks like the rally in South Korean equities has legs, but its currency is tanking. Well, what's that all about?
Right, you are, yes. The benchmark Kospi index continues to notch new highs, but regulators are grilling banks over the hoarding of US dollars as weakness in the Korean won grows. South Korean shares hitting a high of, well, let's see, 0.84%, 4,624 points. This as battery makers led the rise. The rally is in its sixth session. LG Energy and peer Samsung SDI among the biggest advancers. Other sectors which boosted the index included auto, defense, and shipbuilding. Hyundai Motors gaining about 7.5% today. The won moving in the opposite direction, though it hit its weakest level in more than 2 weeks. Authorities summoned 7 local banks last week to question them about increasing US dollar deposits amid growing expectations of extended weakness in the Korean won. Chinese equity starting this week with a strong start as the saga surrounding Jerome Powell and the U.S. Federal Reserve nudges the rotation away from Wall Street. 3 major indices closing solidly in the green. The Shanghai Composite ending the day 1% higher. Second bourse, the Shenzhen component up by 1.75%, led by the tech counters. And speaking of which, tech counters also continuing to shore up sentiment in Hong Kong. It ended the day 1.44 in the green. Shares in solar firms surging after authorities said that they would cancel export tax rebates on some products. The sector has been struggling with severe overcapacity, and investors are now weighing the chances of a consolidation. Value-added tax rebates will be removed on April the 1st as the government seeks to rein in exports. Now, there has been accusations on the World Trade Front that China has been unfairly subsidizing manufacturing in the solar energy sector. Meantime, China's chip designer OmniVision closing more than 16% up in Hong Kong on its first day of trading there. It raised about $616 million in its listing. Geopolitical ripping through the global commodity markets. Traders rushing into safe haven assets like gold, the precious metal, jumping to a record high following the focus on U.S. Federal Reserve's independence, as well as geopolitical tensions around Iran and Venezuela. Gold breaking through the 4,600 level for the first time earlier today, with ongoing geopolitical uncertainties fueling safe haven demand. Gold is currently up 1.82% in late Asian trade, 4,592.95 per ounce. Silver also hitting an all-time high earlier. It is up $84.30 per ounce. Meantime, crude futures are currently trading lower. This after Iran said that it had control over the weekend violence. Brent crude is currently $63.03 a barrel, down 0.5%. U.S. market, a West Texas Intermediate, down 0.36%. Kingsley Jones from Jevons Global explained what the latest developments could mean for commodities.
So much of the crude oil from the Middle East goes through that narrow passage, and Iran can effectively close that. So, look, I think that's the big risk in this scenario. With Venezuela, I think although there's been a lot of talk about how much oil reserves Venezuela has in the global context, about 17%, it's heavy crude that's sulfur-rich, and it can only go to a limited number of refineries. So I don't think that the Venezuelan situation is going to affect oil very much. Indeed, China only gets about 3% of their oil from Venezuela. So I would take that one off the table. I don't think that's a big concern. But this instability in Iran is most definitely a risk that oil would rise as a result of any interruption to flows from the Strait of Hormuz. I think that these are short-term elements of that geopolitical risk, which will certainly give precious metals in general and gold in particular a boost. But I would point out that this gold bull market's now been going for at least 2 years. And the drivers are long-term, in particular central bank buying, especially in the global south. In the circumstances with the abduction of Maduro from Venezuela.
And now a story that blends two hot topics, and we're talking about money and football. So according to a Nikkei report, Japan and South Korean currencies are sliding against the US dollar. And it's not just food costs or energy bills that's going up. Even signing up foreign football stars is apparently getting pricier. So who else but Roland here in the hot seat to tell us more about this? So what exactly is going on? I mean, now with the won and the yen weakening against the US dollars, does that mean that the clubs will have trouble signing on to these foreign players?
Well, it's all interconnected, isn't it? I mean, when the Korean won and the yen weakens against the dollar, that means everything is priced upwards because the dollar is more expensive against it. Japan, fuel exports of LNG, the raw materials that it needs for its factories. And yes, of course, footballers as well, because they are importing foreign talent footballers into their clubs. So these foreign players typically are paid in US dollars.
And that's interesting to note. I mean, has that always been the case? Foreign players coming in and they're just paid in USD, no matter which country or clubs they play for?
Well, it is the norm. I mean, foreign players can decide to either opt for USD or the euro. These players want to hedge against the currency. They don't want the forex risk. And the likelihood is that these foreign players also want to spend that money back in their respective countries. So that's the reason why. So that forex risk is now pushed to the football clubs themselves.
So I guess, okay, I mean, the club definitely gets hit, right, when the currency drops. How bad is it? Give us a sense of what the numbers look like.
Yeah, the currency declines are quite significant. I mean, compare the Korean won in 2021 as compared to today. $1 million in today's terms in Korean won, they would have to pay 19% more. It's even worse when it comes to the euro, because over the same period, 2021 to today, the euro has actually gone up 28% against the Korean won.
So, and what is also interesting to note is the timing of all of this, because the Korean League, they're loosening their rules on foreign players, which means that they technically can bring in more foreign players. But what's the repercussion of the one?
Well, it's a double header, I tell you. The K-League has suddenly decided, yes, we want to bring in more foreign players. But at the same time, they are also competing against the likes of deeper pocket clubs in Saudi Arabia. I mean, they need to put bums on seats to get these foreign players in. And on top of which, now they have this currency weakness, which means that when it comes to signing on fees as well as salaries that they pay these foreign footballers, they can't be offering as much as they once did, 5-6 years ago.
And I mean, football is one of, homegrown sports, right, for Korea and Japan. So now the question is, who can afford it and who can't?
Right. So the bigger clubs can. Ulsan HD, which is linked to conglomerate Hyundai, or Pohang Steelers, which is owned by steelmaker POSCO. These clubs can probably absorb the costs. But when it comes to the smaller city clubs, well, they're going to have difficulties. I mean, the K-League data, for example, let me share with you. Total foreign players spend in Korean won terms has actually risen something like 71% between the period 2021 and 2024. And the number of players has also increased during that same period by 34%. So the cost pressures is real.
And that's quite a stark statistic that you just shared with us. Is it also the same story for Japan?
Yeah, similar story for Japan. I mean, Japan has for years allowed foreign players to come in by the droves, but the Japanese yen, well, that suffered even more. I mean, in 2019, the Japanese yen was worth 108 to the dollar. Today, it's 156. So we're talking about something along the lines of 44% more expensive in Japanese yen terms to bring in a foreign player.
All right, and I would imagine also more expensive tickets for the fans and maybe merchandise as well. Well, thanks so very much, Roland, for joining us and explaining this all to us. Well, on this note, we are going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia Tonight, we are going to dig deep into rare earths and find out what's behind the global tussle for these critical minerals. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines you're following. China warning the U.S. against interference in the internal affairs of other countries after Washington threatened intervention over deadly protests across Iran. Tehran says it does not seek a war but is prepared and open to talks based on mutual respect. G7 finance leaders head to Washington for emergency talks as the race to secure rare earths heats up. Analysts warning that China's dominance in critical minerals may last another decade. And a world's first, Japan launches a historic mission to explore seabed mud-rich in rare earths as Tokyo looks to reduce its reliance on China. Japan is the only country that has managed to reduce its dependence on Chinese rare earths, bringing it down to about 50% today, compared to 90% back in 2010. Authorities then had to look for alternatives after Beijing stopped the export of such minerals. Well, that was in response to Tokyo's arrest of a Chinese boat captain following a collision with the Japanese Coast Guard near the disputed islands of Senkaku or Diaoyu. A CNA documentary, When Titans Clash, The Race for Rare Earths, details Japan's efforts to emerge as a force in critical minerals.
The incident was eventually resolved by the release of the fishing boat's captain. But the price of rare earths soared by 10 times in the year following the incident. Alarmed by this choke point, the Japanese government put together a package to enhance rare earth resilience. A budget of 100 billion Japanese yen, worth $1.2 billion at the time, was prepared in the month following the incident. More money was to follow in the years after.
Stockpiling is the first agenda, and then building up the recycling takes the time. But recycling ecosystem was there, so investing more for the recycling was another. And then this supplementary budget also pays for the compensations for the companies as well. And fourth, the investment in Australia. Basically, doing everything we can to enhance the resilience.
Another key strategy in the resilience package was to develop new technologies to reduce reliance on rare earth minerals. It's a mission that continues today. Here at NextCore, engineers have created a new method in metal refining and processing, which prevents high-performance motors from getting too hot, hence doing away with the need for certain rare earth magnets.
モーター自体の発熱を抑えることができますので、これまでモーターに要求されていた高耐熱性磁石の使用を減らすことができるということになります。つまり高耐熱性磁石に使われていた重機土類、ディスプロシウム、テルビウムなどの原料の使用が抑えられるという特徴がございます。
Efforts undertaken by NextCore Technologies represent just one of many initiatives that corporate Japan undertook to reduce or replace rare earth use. Other examples include the work of companies like Proterial, which developed magnets primarily composed of iron oxide. Denso, which created magnets using iron and nickel. Daido Steel, which also developed a magnet requiring no rare earths for Honda. And Toshiba, which worked together with Tohoku University to develop samarium iron isotropic bonded magnets, which is another type of magnet that reduces the use of rare earths. For 15 years, Japanese companies engineered new ways to replace or reduce Chinese magnets. But there was one major hurdle.
Yes, technologically it's possible. The question is, it's too expensive. It's not commercially viable.
Japan also searched far and wide for sites outside of China with rare earth mineral deposits. That search brought it to Mongolia. In November 2010, Japan and Mongolia signed a deal to push for joint exploitation of rare earth minerals in the Central Asian country. Japan also invested $250 million in Australia's Lynas and its refining facility in Malaysia, which by 2023 was supplying 90% of Japan's neodymium and praseodymium rare earth needs, up from virtually none before the Chinese embargo.
The investment to the company Lynas in Australia was heavily subsidized by the Japanese government in terms of the supply. And on the demand side, the companies are also taking this as the insurance policies. Those companies like Hitachi or Daido are procuring not just from China, but also coming from the recycling and coming from Australia. Even though these are expensive,
without the Japanese government subsidizing these mines and without the companies willing to pay a higher price than market price, do you think that these rare earth mines outside of China could have survived?
No. I mean, if you let everything in a market, it is very difficult to survive in the market. Chinese rare earth mineral is much more competitive. This is one of the reasons why it's very difficult for the companies in Australia, United States, Canada, and elsewhere is struggling because of the cost.
And of course, you can catch the full CNA documentary When Titans Clash, The Race for Rare Earths on CNA.Asia and the CNA mobile app. Now, China may be the world's top producer of rare earths, but it still relies on a key supplier, Myanmar. The Southeast Asian nation is China's single biggest source, accounting for 2/3 of rare earth imports. Now, trade between the nations increased following the 2021 coup, with rare earth exports from Myanmar to China surging fivefold to $3.6 billion. CNA's Leung Wai-kit breaks down the factors behind the increase with Yasmin Yonkers.
The lack of regulation that creates an environment for illegal mining firms to come up to meet the second factor, which is a surge of demand for rare earths by China. About 5 years ago, China announced plans to boost their EVs, and that was when the mining industry, the rare earth mining industry in Myanmar took shape. Now, I want to bring you back to 2011. That was when the junta had transited to a civilian government back then, led by then-President Thein Sein. And during that time, there was some sort of effort to regulate the rare earth mining sites to see how they can, leverage on that. But as you can imagine, 2011, there was a lot on Myanmar's plate. So it went on to do other things, and the mining industry, the rare earth mining industry, did not take shape until 2020, around 2020.
All right, and at the moment we know Myanmar is in the middle of a multi-phase election. What kind of outcome would be favorable to sustain rare earth exports to China?
The quick answer is for the Myanmar junta to win the elections, because when they win the elections, or if they win the elections rather, they can form parliament and then they can have a more sort of control over the mining sites. And of course, it also speaks to China's interests if, let's say, the Myanmar army were to win, because they can then protect their Belt Road initiatives, their interests and businesses in Myanmar. Now, I earlier spoke with a Myanmar-China expert who talked to me about the current state of cooperation between China and Myanmar on rare earths. Take a listen.
China is buying is because of the proximity and because of the cheaper labor and because of there is no strong taxation and control and compliance on the environment. That creates Myanmar rare earth as a very price competitive in the China market.
Now, I must add that right now, it is not the junta that controls these mining sites. It is whomever is having territorial control of that area. And right now, it is an ethnic army group, the KIA.
Well, it looks like Malaysia is also moving to develop its own rare earth supply chain as global demand surges amid geopolitical tensions. It aims to reduce its reliance on China while navigating environmental, regulatory and investment challenges. Well, CNA's Melissa Goh has a story.
More than 16 million tons of rare earth deposits are believed to lie beneath forest reserves and mountain ranges across Peninsular Malaysia. Home to one of the world's largest rare earth refineries, Malaysia is seen as well placed to develop an integrated industry. Australia's mining giant, Lynas, already produces more than 5% of global rare earth output at its plant in Pahang.
So really important for all countries to have choice about supply chains, and one of the great things about having Lynas here for Malaysia is it's actually been able to develop a lot of the supply chains, including skills, as well as some of the equipment that is required to produce rare earth.
While Lynas is seeking to extend its operating license from 3 to 15 years, the Malaysian government has imposed a ban on unrefined rare earth exports to focus on domestic processing and downstream activities.
Now, as Malaysia races to be an important part in the global supply for critical minerals, the government aims to increase rare earth outputs exponentially to 30,000 tons a year by 2030 and unlock an estimated $6.5 billion to the economy and create some 25,000 jobs. Targets which industry players say are just too ambitious.
China took more than 4 decades to build up where they are today, and also if you were to look at Lynas, they also spent more than 10 years. So naturally, this is not something that can happen overnight. You need to have a conducive ecosystem.
Mr. Lim says Malaysian mining firm MCRE, which partners China Rare Earth Corporation, extracts rare earth elements from ionic clay in the central state of Perak using in situ leaching. Chemical reagents are injected into the soil through tubes several meters deep. The leached liquid is then collected and processed into rare earth carbonates. MCRE currently produces about 2,000 tons of rare earth oxide, all of which is exported to China.
The advantage Malaysia is having because we are friends to everyone, right? We don't take side. We are in a very good position. We must start from a very small scale because to ramp up to 30,000 tons is going to be very challenging.
While Malaysia has the technical capability to develop its own mining industry using in situ leaching, considered less harmful to the environment, breaking into the supply chain long dominated by China remains difficult.
The question here is, are we able to produce that chemical reagent locally? Considering that rare earth is geopolitics product, unless you are able to manage your supply chain, otherwise it's going to be very risky.
Another industry expert, meanwhile, has called on the government to relax the current ban on raw rare earth exports in order to attract investors.
If you have, say, I want you to mine, but I don't want you to export, where am I going to sell my products? You will never get any upstream investors. So if you don't have a robust upstream, you are not able to convince the people that if you come here, I have a secured domestic supply, then it's easy for them to bring in the midstream.
Furthermore, he said a complete ban has driven more people into illegal mining. To address an industry that remains highly fragmented, he has also called for stronger collaboration between state and federal authorities to harmonize rules and regulations. Melissa Goh, CNA, Kuantan, Malaysia.
Well, time now for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, an emerging solution in the US to its rare earth needs that's far above ground. The race for rare earth independence from China is fueling a dash for deal-making with other countries. But a key solution is emerging in the U.S. and far above ground in America's own industrial waste. Tony Waterman files this report for CNA from Austin, Texas.
The fight over rare earths is emerging as one of the sharpest fronts in the U.S.-China rivalry, with major implications for national security and the global economy. These 17 metals are essential for everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to advanced weapon systems and semiconductor manufacturing. China dominates much of the world's supply and processing, but as geopolitical tensions rise, Washington has been racing to reduce its reliance on Beijing, pouring money into domestic mining and building partnerships with allies. But the answer to the U.S.'s rare earth needs could be hiding in plain sight in existing mine and mineral processing waste. Enough, some researchers say, to meet most, if not all, of the country's rare earth demand.
What we've got here is red mud, or bauxite residue more eloquently.
Doesn't look very red to me.
No, it doesn't. And as you take some of the moisture out, it takes on a different color.
Red mud is a byproduct of alumina refining, a process that generates a white powder essential for making aluminum metal. This particular batch comes from Louisiana, from the very last alumina refinery in the United States. Normally, the caustic mud is stored in massive leveed ponds like this one, or dry stacked and built into hills. So it's essentially considered waste.
It is considered waste. So that's the opportunity.
But not to you.
Not to us.
Buried in this muddy waste is a gold mine of rare earth elements in very high concentrations. 6,000 parts per million, says Chris Young, 30 times higher than what's found in the Earth's crust.
A highly skilled and educated staff of
Young and his team at Element USA near Austin, Texas, are now extracting these rare earths from this source. They're also testing other mining waste, like coal tailings and low-grade coal ores, to determine which elements are present and how to cost-effectively extract them.
The need for these minerals has really grown, for these rare earths, as our technologies developed, as we look at high-performance magnets. So I think there's a growing recognition, even for the general population, that, hey, this is a big deal.
Rare earths are a group of 17 elements, including the 15 lanthanides found near the bottom of the periodic table. They have tongue-twisting names like praseodymium and neodymium. They power modern-day life, used in smartphones, medical equipment, electric vehicles, and wind turbines, making them a matter of economic security. They're also critical to U.S. national defense. Fire! The F-35 fighter jet, for example, contains more than 400 kilograms of rare earths. The Virginia-class submarine, more than 4,000. Much of it is found in powerful rare earth magnets used in engines, radars, and weapons guidance systems. Yet despite their critical importance, the U.S. relies almost entirely on its biggest rival to meet its rare earth needs, importing up to 80% of supplies from China.
We're held hostage by China.
Gracelyn Baskren is a leading voice on America's critical mineral security. She says rare earths have become China's most powerful negotiating tool against the U.S., as witnessed last year when Beijing, citing national security concerns, imposed export controls on rare earths critical for high tech and defense during tariff negotiations with Washington.
They forced us to negotiate and give up things on the areas of tariffs and semiconductors because this has all become part of the trade war that we didn't want to. I mean, I didn't see a year ago that this administration would be negotiating with China in the way that it has.
The restrictions are now on hold for a year, but the Trump administration has been on an international deal blitz to reduce the country's reliance on China, forging multi-billion-dollar partnerships to develop mining and processing facilities with nations like Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Japan, and Australia.
In about a year from now, we'll have so much critical mineral and
rare earths that you won't know what to do with it.
Experts say that assessment is highly optimistic. America's rare earth sector is decades behind China's. It has only one active mine and lacks sufficient capacity to process, refine, or make magnets.
Mining is not an industry you turn on and turn off when there's conflict. And so we are looking at a lead time to getting ourselves where we need to go.
Does that mean that the U.S.'s national security is at risk right now?
It means that we are not prepared for a long conflict.
To accelerate the process, the U.S. has also been pouring billions of dollars into reviving domestic production, partnering with private companies to help fund rare earth startups.
What you're basically looking at here is a big concrete box on steroids.
In recent years, Texas-based Novion Magnetics has received more than $35 million from the Defense Department. It's the only high-performance rare earth magnet manufacturer in the U.S., churning out millions and millions of individual magnets a year. CEO Scott Dunn says the company aims to chip away at America's China dependence, but is realistic about how quickly that can happen.
We're not going to displace, on any timeline that's reasonable, China altogether. So what we've really set out to do is at least be, a very, very high performance, high quality magnet producer that at least offers some sort of a strategic second source, if that's all that it is, to the U.S. government, to American end users alike.
Novion is also turning to waste as a resource, recycling rare earth magnets from end-of-life products like MRI machines and electric vehicles to help bolster domestic supply.
And so that yttrium mineral, that's 40 times coastal level, so that's really concentrated.
Researchers Bridget Scanlon and Brent Ellis lead a team at the University of Texas at Austin, evaluating rare earth concentrates in existing mine and mineral waste. One recent study found that coal ash from power plants contains up to 11 million tons of rare earths, nearly 8 times the amount of rare earths the U.S. has in domestic reserves.
Could enough rare earths be extracted from this waste to meet demand for rare earths in the U.S.?
Yes, I think so. There are a lot of factors that need to be considered. One is the resource and the concentrations, another is the extractability, and then the economic and the price volatility. So a lot of different factors become important.
Working out those bottlenecks won't be easy or cheap. But with the International Energy Agency expecting demand for rare earths to soar by up to 7-fold by 2040 and geopolitical tensions simmering between Washington and Beijing, the U.S. will need all the waste it can get its hands on. For CNA, I'm Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas.
And that wraps up Monday's East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.